Well, let's get to the election campaign now. As I said earlier, this is the last week of campaigning, with Election Day being next Monday. And for a check of where things stand, let's bring in polls analyst Éric Grenier, the founder and the writer of the Writ. Hello, Éric.
Hello.
So let's begin with some of the new data sets which you were working with this morning. Liaison, Main Street, Nanos, just to name a few. And when you crunch the numbers that we're looking at right now on screen, what are you finding with your own top-line results?
Yeah, I find that we're not seeing as much movement as maybe there might have seemed to have been just a few days ago. We saw the polls that come from Nanos, Liaison, Main Street, as you mentioned. Those are the polls we see every single day. So they're 3-day rolling polls. They are the most up-to-date numbers that we've seen. And while the gap between the Liberals and the Conservatives varies across those three polls, we have seen that since the debate, both the Liberals and the Conservatives have both actually come down, and so the net margin between the two, if we're looking at the trend lines, haven't shifted all that much. And we also saw a number of polls that were also published later in the day, not in the exact same time period as those three rolling polls, but leaning much more closer to that bigger lead than that close race that we saw from the Main Street survey.
Okay, leaning into the bigger lead, and when you talk about that, it's Main Street that has the Liberal-Conservative tie. It's Nanos that has, what, an 8-point spread between Liberals and Conservatives? What's happening here? Even if you say it's leaning more towards that spread, what's exactly happening that we're having this kind of discrepancy?
Well, I think one of the things we're seeing is, first of all, a lot of this is long weekend polling, which, there might be a little bit more divergences between them. We've also seen from Main Street that they've been one of the polling firms that has had the closest race throughout this campaign. So the fact that they are still showing that closer race while the other polls aren't is not too much of a surprise. There's also a little bit of a link between the polls that have stronger numbers for the NDP and weaker numbers for the NDP, that is also influencing some of the overall results. But I think that when we're looking at the bulk of the surveys, the consensus view of where things are right now, it is looking much more like that 5-point lead, 6-point lead for the Liberals than that tie. We are seeing more often that the Liberals and the Conservatives have that kind of gap between them than these one-off polls. We haven't seen a lot of them that are showing this close race.
Okay, so not as close as some might suggest. When you look at the regions, though, do they back up that type of analysis?
Well, if the regions say one thing, it is that the national polling levels might be masking just how much of an advantage the Liberals have, because even in some of those polls where we're seeing that the gap between the Liberals and the Conservatives is maybe 5-6 points nationwide, we're seeing some big numbers in Ontario. We saw from the Nanos poll, from a Liaison, from a couple other surveys that were out today, that the Liberals had a double-digit lead in Ontario. If that kind of margin is what is actually happening, then that is for sure a Liberal majority government, just to see that kind of gap in Ontario. So while in the regional numbers, we see that the Liberal advantage is very much holding. They still lead in Quebec. They still lead in Atlantic Canada. Most of the polls have them leading, even if by a small margin, BC, that they are still in that majority position. So even in the poll, Main Street puts out seat projections themselves. Even in the poll that had a tie between the Liberals and the Conservatives, it was still more or less a toss-up whether the Liberals could get that majority government or not.
Okay, and so you take the numbers and put them into your poll tracker that you're doing for the CBC. If you translate today's numbers into the Éric Grenier machine, what does that look like in terms of seat projection?
It is an advantage for the Liberals. As I mentioned, because of how they have that regional breakdown, we project they win about 194 seats right now, so that is clearly above the majority threshold. The Conservatives would win 122 seats, and the Bloc Québécois would take 21, 5 for the NDP, 1 for the Greens. There is a range of various outcomes for these because they aren't precise projections, but they all really point towards the Liberals being in majority territory. There's very few scenarios where the Conservatives would end up limiting the Liberals to a minority and certainly limiting the Liberals to second place. There's not really much indication in the polls that the Conservatives would be even close to winning the most seats. If the election were held today, we still see where things will shift over the next few days, but right now, the Liberals really have all the cards.
Okay, as you said, if the election were today, but it's not, it's 7 days down the road, what's the likelihood that things could change with a week left in this campaign and really millions of Canadians already casting a ballot?
Yeah, a lot of that vote is already locked in. A lot of that vote is probably on the decided side of things, so maybe they weren't going to shift anyway. But we're really not seeing a lot of signs of a building momentum. Often when you do see that the results on election day are different from where things were a week before, you usually see it coming. It's usually a building, a trend line that is pushing one party up and one party down. But we're really not seeing much of that. A lot of the shifts we've seen from polls to polls are a point here, there, a point here, a point there. Not really showing a lot of momentum for anybody, really. So that tells me that I would not expect a lot of movement over the next few days. And if we do see that kind of movement, it might be because of something that happens in the next few days. So right now, from my vantage point, it looks like the Liberals have the ability to continue holding this lead through to Election Day. But we'll always see what kind of events can pop up and shake things loose.
Yeah, and you and I will be speaking again in a few days' time. But for this conversation, Eric, thank you for that. I appreciate the time.
All right, thank you.